We chanted a passage just now about the 4 mountains moving in from 4 directions. It comes from a sutta where a king comes to see the Buddha in the middle of the day. And the Buddha asks him, "What have you been doing?" And the king is remarkably frank. He says the typical things of someone who's obsessed with gaining and maintaining his power. And so the Buddha asks him, suppose there was somebody trustworthy coming from the east, saying there was a huge mountain moving in from the east, crushing all living beings in its path. Another reliable person coming from the south, saying there's a mountain coming in from the south. A person from the west, a person from the north. A mountain moving in from the west, a mountain moving in from the north, crushing all living beings in its path. With this huge destruction of life, what would you do? The king said, what else can I do but practice the Dhamma? Practice what is good. The Buddha said, in the same way, I tell you, aging, illness, and death are moving in, crushing living beings in our path. What are you going to do? The king says, what else can I do but practice the Dhamma, practice what is good? Because that's what our real wealth lies in. The king is portrayed generally in the canon as being someone who's brand new to the whole idea of a spiritual life. Now he has the Buddha living on the outskirts of his city. He gets a chance to talk with the Buddha every now and then. He comes up with these realizations, and he tries them out with the Buddha. One of them is that even if you have a huge army, if you're not observing the precepts, you're leaving yourself unprotected. If you're observing the precepts, and even if you don't have a huge army, then you are protected. The Buddha says, that's the way it is. So this is where our protection lies. We live in this world of aging, illness, and death. The mountains are moving in. So we would want to develop strengths inside, wealth inside that the mountains can't crush. And one of our strengths, of course, is the meditation, training the mind. It's based on generosity, it's based on virtue. You develop good qualities of the heart and the mind. Because in training the mind, the Pali word citta also means heart. So not just training the thinking side of the mind, but we're training the part of the mind that wishes for happiness, wishes for a true happiness. And we're using our thinking abilities to figure out what kind of happiness would be true, what kind of actions would lead to true happiness. That, the Buddha said, is the beginning of wisdom, discernment. The question, what when I do will lead to long-term welfare and happiness? What when I do will lead to long-term harm and suffering? You're taking your desire for happiness for granted, and you're using your wisdom to develop it, to provide for it. That's when the heart and the mind grow together. In growing together, they become strong. To get to know your mind, it's good to do things that you know are good, like being generous and being virtuous. Because the mind is then more open to itself. The heart is more open. And you see what's going on. And then you have a sense of your own worth because you're doing these things. So that when you see there are parts of the heart and the mind that are not so good, you're not blown away. You realize you do have some goodness to you. You can take that as a basis for your confidence. And then when you look into the mind, and as the Buddha said, when you can begin to see your own foolishness, that's when you begin to be wise. Ajahn Chah made a similar comment. He says, when you get to know the mind, one of the first things you find out about is how much it lies to itself. We tell ourselves that we have good intentions, but sometimes our good intentions cover up something that's not so good. And as long as we don't feel confident in ourselves, we keep it covered up. But as a sense of confidence comes from doing what's good, we look and see, how can we make the mind better? So you build on your confidence, you build on your goodwill. And that way things begin to open up. We talk a lot about the techniques of meditation, and they are important, but we also have to remember the motivation and the qualities of the heart that we have to bring to it. There are three that the Buddha talks about in terms of his own quest for awakening. One is heedfulness, realizing that because your actions make a difference, you really have to be very careful about what you do and you say and you think. And particularly, you have to be careful about your intentions. Unfortunately, our intentions are an area where we tend to be pretty blind to ourselves, like those old maps of the 17th century, where they'd have the coastlines of the different continents and then huge white blank areas on the interior. Because very early on we learn to lie to ourselves about our intentions. So we have to learn how to undo that if we really want to be safe. So you take care. Be very careful to watch yourself as you act. That training that the Buddha gave to Rahula, looking at his intentions before he acted, what he expected the results of that action to be. And he told him to act only on intentions that he saw or expected were not going to cause any harm. Then as he was acting on them, he was to look at the results that were coming out. And if he saw that the action he was doing was actually causing harm, he would stop. Didn't see any harm, he'd continue. When the action was done, he still wasn't done. He had to look at the long-term results. And if he saw that he had caused harm, he should go talk it over with someone else who's more advanced on the path, and then make up his mind not to repeat that mistake, have a sense of shame around it, a healthy sense of shame that comes together with self-regard, comes together with self-esteem. The sense that that kind of action was beneath him. He could do better. If, looking back on his action, he saw that he hadn't caused any harm, then he could take joy in that fact and continue training. Now notice here, this is the training that's based on acting on good intentions. If you act on intentions you know are unskillful or know will be harmful, what are you going to learn? Yet the mind keeps saying, well, let me see for sure that that was harmful. That's the mind that's going to cover things up. You want to learn, okay, even when you think something is harmless, if it does cause harm, then you've learned something new. That's how you grow. Now, it requires a lot of care. I've known a lot of people who said, that's an awful lot of attention to pay to your actions. And the question is, well, what else are you going to pay attention to? You learn from acting. You learn by doing. And you learn by trying to do your best. And when you see that it's not good enough, then you try to do better. Because the whole point of heedfulness is that even though there are dangers that can come from careless actions, there's safety that can come when you act skillfully. If that safety were not possible, then the whole question of heedfulness wouldn't have any meaning. It's based on heedfulness, as the Buddha said, that all the strengths of the mind needs are based. Strength of conviction, that your actions really do matter. Strength of persistence, as you try your best to act in skillful ways. Strength of mindfulness and concentration, as you try to give the mind a place to rest and gather its strength. And then strength of discernment, as you examine your own actions, above and beyond what the Buddha said was skillful and not skillful, as you learn to look for yourself. How do you cause harm in your own mind? How do you cause disturbance in your own mind? What can you do not to cause that disturbance? The Buddha does give some general instructions here, but a lot of it has to depend on your powers of observation. So it's in this way that heedfulness leads to the second quality the Buddha said was important about his awakening, or it was necessary for his awakening. That's ardency, the wholehearted desire to do this well. Notice that your heart is in it. You're not doing it simply because you're forced to. You learn how to talk yourself into wanting to do what is skillful and wanting to abandon what is unskillful, even if it goes against your likes. You learn how to change your likes, change your sense of values, looking for the long term, and not for your immediate likes and dislikes. Having a sense of the power of your actions. And finally, there's resolution. This is the quality the Buddha doesn't discuss that much. But it basically means, when things look bleak, you hold to what you know is right. When the mountains come moving in, you keep on doing what is good. There's that story of Shackleton and his expedition down to the Antarctic. The plan was to take his ships down, land on one coast, hike across the continent, and get to another side, and another ship would pick them up. Well, it turned out they couldn't even get to the coast. Everything was frozen in. Their ship was frozen in. It was going to be crushed. So they had to leave the ship, drag their dinghies behind them as they walked across this slushy ice. And things looked pretty bleak. Now, who was going to come in and pick them up? There were no planes to come in and no radios to contact anybody. It was just them walking across the ice. And what kept them going was Shackleton's insistence that, well, whatever you do what you know you should be doing. And then even if you don't come out alive, you don't come out with a sense that you failed because of your own laziness or your own carelessness. So this resolution has a sense of self-honor and self-worth. You just keep on doing what you know is right. The mountains may come in and crush, but you still have your goodness. Now it turned out in the expedition they did all come out alive because they did what they knew they had to do. This relates to that other passage we chanted just now, about the importance of not thinking about the past, thinking about the future, but focusing on the present moment. You focus on the present moment not because it's a wonderful moment or because your awakened nature is there. You focus because there are things you need to do here. Because tomorrow death may come. And your duties, of course, have to do with the duties of the Four Noble Truths. We're here to comprehend suffering, to abandon its cause, to realize the cessation of suffering by developing the path. Buddha doesn't impose these duties on us, but he does tell us, from his perspective as an expert, that these are the things that will lead to the end of suffering. So however bright or bleak the perspective is for the future, you've got the present moment where you can do your duty. For instance, to comprehend suffering. What are you doing that is the suffering? That's interesting. It's not just that you're doing something that causes suffering. You're doing is the suffering. You're doing clinging. Passion and desire for the different aggregates. As you create a sense of your sensual fantasies, as you create your views about the world, your sense of what should and shouldn't be done, and even your sense of self. It's all created out of these aggregates, the things that we take to be really solid in the world. When you look at them carefully, they're just instances of form, feeling, perceptions, thought constructs, and consciousness. And when you look carefully at these things, you begin to realize, how could you construct anything really reliable out of them? The one reliable thing you can construct out of them is the path. It's like building a ladder up a mountain. The ladder is it's not totally permanent. It's going to fall away. It's going to rot away. And so think of it as a ladder made out of vines. But it's good enough to get you up. Or in the Buddha's image, the raft you take across the river. Rafts can fall apart very easily. But if you bind it together well enough, you can get across the river. That's good enough. But everything else you can make out of these aggregates is unreliable. So you rely on the path. And that's how you get across. And once you've gotten across, then you're truly safe. Because there is a deathless element that the mind can discover as it follows the path. That was the Buddha's discovery himself. We're so familiar with the story of the Buddha that it's good to stop and think about how remarkable it was. He basically gained victory over death. He found something deathless, something with no limits at all, a happiness with no limits. Through his efforts. The efforts didn't cause it, of course, because deathless, if it were caused, it wouldn't be deathless. But he gained victory over death, and he says that we can do that too, through the goodness we develop in our hearts and minds. So have confidence in this goodness. This is where your true survival is. If you give yourself seriously enough to the path, you can come out victorious as well.